Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to go back a good long way in my testimony. One of the most important parts of it was as a child coming up and what happened in that as a young child and with my dad. And truly, he laid the foundation in Jesus. Jesus was the foundation he laid his life on. And then he led me to lay my life on that same foundation as I worked and found Jesus later on in life. Miss Mary Smith, and she was from the same little community that I grew up in, and I think we went to school together through about the third grade, maybe the fourth, and back at that time she had a different name, but kindly giving you testimony and going back to a child, you know, it's kind of good to have somebody there, and one day we'll talk, and she'll probably remember some of the things that I remember. It's so good to have my son and his wife Dana here tonight, and truly Dana has been a bright spot in our family. She's a jewel. She's a diamond. And Alan is the same thing, and especially my wife. She has brought a lot of joy to our family through her songs and singing like Brother Glenn has. Brother Robert really touched my heart this morning in his message, and one of my favorite scriptures, one of the scriptures, I'm not going to go past my salvation experience that I had when I was 29 years old. I'm going to stop there because if I didn't, I would probably be here. I could be here 3 hours sharing what God has done in my life and people around me, because He has been good to me. Sometimes they call me, when I go to Coleman, they call me chosen, and truly I was. In Colossians 1:27, it says, Christ in you, the hope of glory. When I found that verse many, many years ago, I did not realize everything that meant. I would be one way at home. I'd be one way at church. I'd be one way at work. And I'd be another way at play, fishing, and those things I'd done. And when I realized that night in church under a little old evangelist that Christ was in me, it didn't matter if I was at church, if I was at home, or where. And I have failed. But from that night on, I tried to be the same person everywhere I was, because I knew that Jesus was with me. And even walking into company meetings, as I would go in, I would lift my feet a little higher. Not a worldly pride or anything like that. But I thought, if they knew who I was in Jesus, they would bow their head, because one day we're going to be with Him when He comes back. And I thought about if He come to Spanish Fort and He was coming down the street, and maybe our women had the tambourines and they was before Jesus, and they said, Jesus is here, Jesus is here. He's coming back one day, as Brother Robert said this morning. And He's going to rule and reign on earth for 1,000 years. And I'm going to be there. And tonight, as I bring my testimony, I wouldn't do it but for one reason. There may be one person here that you've got doubt. One person here like I was. I could have played church. I could have been in there. I could have done everything. Sandra could have sang, and I taught all that, but it wasn't real. It was false. It was what you put on, like in working at the company. The Bible says in 2 Peter that He has given us everything. The verse before, through His mighty power, He's given us everything that pertains to life and godliness. I thought about that verse that as Brother Robert was preaching this morning, and we need to realize that I'm probably the worst one in here on not living up to the potential that God has placed in me through Christ in me, the hope of glory. My testimony is going to start with my dad accepting Christ. His daddy's father and them moved in from Utah. And you know what that meant. They wasn't Baptists, they wasn't Methodists. And my mom and daddy moved to about 2 or 3 blocks of one another up on Smith Lake area. And they fell in love and married. Dr. Paddock come out to an old cotton cow pasture and delivered me, and they named me, and I was there. And 6 months later, a dreaded disease struck Max Brown. Diphtheria. Diphtheria affects it around your nostrils and your throat and everything. You can't breathe and eat. So I was in trouble. They called Dr. Paddock out, and Dr. Paddock, he looked at him and he gave him the bad news. And Daddy was not in church. Mama was raised in church, and her mom and dad, they was active in church and everything like that. And the family started gathering in. And Mama told me this week, she said the neighbors started bringing food. The churches started bringing food. And you know what that meant? I said, Mama, did they really bring food? She said, yep. Well, my daddy, he had heard somewhere that Jesus saves. He had heard somewhere that Jesus is the healer. And so Daddy goes out behind the little old log cabin or what it is. All of them had a chimney, and he knelt down and he built an altar there. And he said, God, if you'll save me, God, if you'll spare my son, I will serve you. I want you to come into my life. And Mama's sister was holding me, she said, and all of a sudden Hassie told Mama, said, Neil, I think he wants you. Said, I think he's hungry. I think he wants to eat, and I've been eating ever since. A few years later, this was in 43. At the end of 44, he got a letter from Uncle Sam. Said, Buck, we want you in the service. So Daddy goes to the Great Lakes and trains, and he gets on a transport ship that carries the Marines and Army, and they picked him up, and they headed to Okinawa. And he got there, and they unloaded and carried wounded men out, back and forth to the ship and the big hospital ship and everything. And all of a sudden, a plane come in, a suicide plane, and it knocked out several of the ships and several men. Daddy said it was horrible. He couldn't talk about it without crying. And the suicide plane was coming directly for their ship, and all of a sudden, it just raised up a little. I told the Navy man tonight, God probably just took and raised it up, hit the mast and the gun and everything, and so they was crippled, and they went back to San Diego and got repaired. They got back over there, and I think the war ended in August and officially in September. But Daddy and them transported prisoners and everything like that, and then he come back to the States, and he laid down in Seattle on the ground, him and some other soldiers, and they kissed the earth. They loved America. Was he going to work? Daddy had committed his life to Jesus. He had accepted him as Savior. And he had answered 2 prayers. He had spared his boy, and he had brought him back from the middle of conflict. And people, Daddy never told us the full story. But it is a horrible thing to do. But it's not near as much as what Jesus did at Calvary for me and you. All of a sudden, Daddy bought a farm, and he started taking us to church. And in fact, us boys worked on the truck one day, and the truck couldn't start, so he hooked up the mules and wagon, and I actually went to church in a wagon. And other people did too. We went to every church there was. There was not a church we didn't visit. If they had service, Daddy went. And we'd say, Daddy, why are we going here? Well, they are trying to make it to heaven, just like we are. And we might learn something. And I can remember one night going towards Decatur from Coleman, a good ways off, and they was having a big time. They had all kind of musical instruments, and they was dancing. And then all of a sudden, this man wanted to clear the stage off. And I said, oh, me. And I looked, and there was no box up there or anything. And they didn't bring anything out that would scare you, so I was relieved, and we was relieved, and we went home. All of a sudden, time passes, life passes, and the years passed it, and they needed a piano player, so the chosen one got chosen again. And I started playing the piano, and I could get by, and I was up there one day playing, and we was playing the invitation, and the pastor's wife come up, and she laid her hand under my shoulder, and she said, Max, is God dealing with you? I said, yes, ma'am. Well, Miss Woodard carried me down the altar, and we went down the altar, and we knelt there, and And she talked to me, but I didn't know what she talked to me about. And I was looking for some kind of an explosion or something to happen and me be changed and all of that. And I got up, and I really had not been changed. I went down just a sinner, and I got up as a sinner, and I went back. The things that I wanted to do before I went down, I still wanted to do. And so time started passing, and went through junior high there at Logan, Alabama, and went to West Point to high school, graduated there, and started to college, and started working at a service station. I was going to college full-time and working at a service station full-time. Well, by and by, here come a little girl by. And I hollered, I said, "Hey, cutie." And the other guys whistled, and I said, "Listen," I was kind of like Lisa. This is part of my testimony like her. I said, "Guys, this one is mine. No more whistling." And so Sandra started coming by, and she really did. She would come by and buy a quarter's worth of gas. And I would clean the windshield. And so we got married. I started to work. Life couldn't be no better. But drifting away from the Lord, I started to work for a large corporation. And I wanted to go to the top. I wanted to go to San Francisco. I wanted to be in the pyramid. And I was on my way. They moved us to Demopolis, gave me my own branch. Immediately the VP sent out a letter. They said, and it said, "There's never been anything like this. That Max Brown has been open 2 months, and he's leading the state or the district or the area, whatever." And I felt good about that because in myself I had been able to do that. And at Demopolis I was free. I thought there was no accountability. I thought I could do everything on my own. 2 precious little boys. Alan was not even a year old when we moved there. Vince was probably 2 or 3. Sandra was good looking. I could work and go home, had a good looking family. Guy next door, he said, "You don't like to fish, do you?" And I said, "I love to fish." So we started fishing, and Andy had a boat, and we got into that. So my life was full. And I thought that I had reached the fulfillment of my life, that I could work. I had people in place that I didn't have to be there. It would run by itself. They were so good. And then my family looked good. Sandra would buy stuff and dress some of the little boys up, and they was handsome. I can show you pictures to prove that. And Sandra was good looking. I can show you pictures showing that. She still is good looking to me. Well, one day Andy said, "Max, we're going to have to leave off fishing for a couple of weeks." I said, "Yeah?" He said, "Yeah." We lived in duplex apartments and everything like that. If something was wrong with one of my vehicles, he would fix that when he got off at Borden Chemical. And nobody like him. His wife could cook a platter of hush puppies, of oysters, and make a warm lemon meringue pie. Well, he said, "I'm going to have to take off. I've got to have surgery." I said, "That's fine. I need to catch up with things at work, see what's really going on." Because they was pretty well running that then, had some sharp people there, and it was booming. I mean, the Lord had beat me to Demopolis. I know now He had beat me there. And he had started working in a little Baptist church over there that got involved with our life. Well, Andy had his surgery, and I said, "Well, Miss Ethel, how's he doing?" "Doing good." Middle of the night, 12 o'clock, 1. I opened the door. It was Ethel. She said, "Max," said Ethel, "Andy is not doing well. They're prepping him to try to get him to Tuscaloosa to save his life." So me and Sandra got ready, and the police drove the ambulance at that time. And so we got Vince and Alan to some people that we knew, and we followed the ambulance, and we got about halfway up there where 43 crosses I-5920, and the ambulance's rear view taillights come on. They dropped the speed limit about 20 miles an hour, and we got to DCH Hospital. And he said, "Do you want to tell her or do you want me?" And I said, "I can't." We headed over to where she was, and she said, I know. Well, through that funeral, the conviction that I had left at that piano settled on me again. I mean, it got way down inside. And I realized that if I died, that I was going to go to a devil's hell. I was not prepared to face a friend dying, much less me dying. So in the funeral service and everything, we really got attached to the little Baptist church, and we started attending, not regular, but we would go every once in a while. I even put a couple of dollars in the offering, and everything. Well, the little girls there, little women, sweet as they could be, they would come to our house, it seemed like every Tuesday night, and they would come in and share with us and how much they loved us and how much they'd love to see us be a part of their church. Well, Sandra was of the faith that I wouldn't be a member of, and I had grew up in another faith that she wouldn't be a member of, and we neither one wanted to be a Baptist. You're talking about a hard place, a rock and a hard place. It was one. So we talked, and she said, "Well, I'll go with you." We got the boys ready, and boy, they was handsome again, and Sandra was good looking, and I walked in, and when you walk in like that, a young couple, and 3, 4, 5-year-old boys, I mean, you get a lot of attention in a Baptist church. Probably everybody else does too. They should. Well, that went on, and all of a sudden they got a new pastor, Ed Gardner. He'd give a commitment. He'd lead somebody to Jesus every day, and he tried. I mean, he had people climbing down poles to see what he wanted to talk about. Well, I went one Sunday, and Brother Ed was preaching, and we went in, and we found our place to sit. In the church, it was not very wide, and it was pretty wide too, but they had 2 rows of pews, and they put the pews against the wall. I mean, you couldn't get out no place but the aisle. Well, that Sunday, as I was under conviction, I thought about crawling under the pew, over the pew. I said, boy, Sandra would really get me then, and it looked kind of strange. I'd get on the boys for doing that. So I made it out the door, and I got to the door, and Brother Ed got me by the hand, and he said, "How's it going?" And he knew. He could tell, but you can look at somebody in the eye, and you know how they're doing. And he was saying, "Max, how you doing way down deep?" He was saying, "I've been watching you. God dealing with you." And he didn't go through all of that. But when I left and I said, "That's it, I'm not going back to that church again," make you feel bad. That week, I couldn't sleep. I literally laid my hand on my heart to see if it was still beating, because I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to make the commitment. I said, "Well, that's it, I'm not going back." And the next Sunday morning, Vince, he come in there, the oldest boy, they was young, still young. He said, "Daddy, let's go to church." Or, "Daddy, are we going to the church?" I don't remember exactly how he said, but boy, the Holy Spirit got a hold of me again, way down deep. I looked at Sandra. She said, "We'll get ready." So it was a miserable drive, about a mile and a half from the house to Westside Baptist Church. And we walked in, and about the only place to sit was that place over against the wall. And during the announcements, I thought, how do I get out of here? And it had already filled up. I don't even know what Brother Ed preached on that Sunday. But about the time the music director got up and started singing, I really got under conviction. And I told myself, I said, I am not going to die and go to a devil's hell. I said, this town knows me. And I said, they're going to laugh about Max Brown walking the aisle and get saved. I said, I'm going to make a fool out of myself. And then the preacher started preaching, and I said, Lord, when is he going to quit? You know, he went on, and he really didn't go past 12, I know. But it seemed like he just preached forever. And I said, if he'll just stop and give an invitation, I said, I'll go down. Well, in a few minutes, he stopped, and he done some talking then. I said, preacher, please. When the music man gave the first start, let's stand and sing, and probably just as I am. On the first verse, I don't know how I got out, but I was way back, and I run to the front, and I got Brother Ed, and I said, Brother Ed, and he said, yes, what can I do for you, Brother Brown? And I said, I want to get saved. I said, I don't want to die and go to a devil's hell. He said, brother, you don't have to. And he said, the sinner's prayer, I would say that, but I couldn't get through it without breaking down. But I asked Jesus to come into my life and heart that day. Back at playing the piano and going down there, nobody explained how to get saved. But Brother Ed was very thorough. He had done it before in that church. I'd seen people, but I didn't pay attention to what they was doing. And he said, well, you know us Baptists, we believe in submersion. I said, Brother Ed, anything you want to do be fine with me. So he said, well, we'll have a baptismal service pretty quick. And then he asked a question that was hard to take. He said, would you like to become a member of this church? I had not looked at the crowd. I said, I don't know. He said, well, I'd love to present you for a membership. And I think Sandra was with me, and I don't really remember. I should. But the only thing it was so exciting, the only thing I can remember that. And he said, well, I'd like to present you. And so he said that, called her name or my name, and he said, I'd like to present him for a membership tonight. I looked out. There was tears. I think I seen everybody. The little girls that had been visiting, they was really weeping. Boy, they had their hankies with them. They'd done that before. They'd been praying for me. The same prayer that my dad had went behind at that chimney. And God saved his soul and spared me. The one that raised that plane up had brought my dad home. That same prayer answering Jesus heard my prayer that day, and them little girls and had been praying. I don't think there was a dry eye in that church, and I mean it was a real emotional time. Well, I can tell you that I have not got over that till yet. I hadn't got over my daddy till yet. I lost him because of some things that happened in service at age 51. I thought about Paul Bailey. Paul, I'd like to be standing at Daddy's grave when Jesus sounds a trumpet. I'd like to see him come out of that grave. I couldn't explain to anybody how that's going to happen. But I can tell you this, the joy of coming to church. I love to come to Spanish Fort Baptist Church. There is a joy that enters in just even on Wednesday night, the short sermon, and then one like today. But as I finish, I would beg you. I've known of preachers that would go to houses and when they come to the door, they would literally get on their knees and cry and beg. Come Come to Jesus. Come to Jesus. If it would help here tonight, I know in a place this big, there is somebody in here that was like me and Sandra was. We was playing church. Now, people we don't know, I know Brother Glenn blessed us Wednesday night with out of Jeremiah. I hadn't got over that yet. But I don't know all the Greek, and I don't know all the Hebrew. But let me tell you this. I know Jesus. Brother Robert.